Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum dear students. I'm Arif and I welcome you all in today's session. To access the notebook for today's session, you can access my course page on my personal website arif.me. You can click the appropriate column under this resource, open up tools and techniques for data science, and you can click this column, the appropriate notebook, and that notebook will be opened in NB Viewer and you can run it online in Binder. The other way is to download the notebook from the course GitHub repository, Data Science, and all the notebooks for this course are housed in this public data science repository. Well, this is the Jupyter notebook dashboard running locally on my machine at port 8888, and here is the notebook for today's session, lecture number 5.3 of the 5th module, data acquisition, for the course titled Tools and Techniques for Data Science. The title for today's session is Web Scraping Using Selenium, Part 1. Before I proceed any further, let me say thanks to my student Abdul Manan, who assisted me in preparing these sample websites to be scraped that I used in this course. Okay. My dear students, this is the third session on web scraping, which is the process of extracting data from websites. In today's session, I will be assuming that you have watched the previous two sessions and have a fair idea of the architecture of web applications. I also assume that you know how to access the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript contents from a web server programmatically using the Python's requests library. And finally, I also assume that you have practiced parsing and extracting data of your interest using Beautiful Soup that we have covered in our previous session. And after getting data of your interest, you have saved the data inside a CSV file using either the toCSV method of Pandas data frame, or maybe using the write row method of the writer object of Python CSV module. My dear students, we closed our previous session by discussing some limitations of scraping websites using request and Beautiful Soup. The first limitation was of this request library, and the limitation was that once you get the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code of a web page using requests, it does not create, or rather it does not execute the JavaScript code, which might be generating some HTML contents. And if we simply create a Beautiful Soup object from that response string, we might not be able to scrape the required data because it's not there. And this browser screenshot at the very top, this image at the top, displays the JavaScript version of our book scraping site with JavaScript disabled in the Chrome browser. And you see there are no books being displayed in the browser window. The second limitation was of Beautiful Soup, using which you cannot write text in a text box and cannot click buttons. And this screenshot, the browser screenshot in the middle, that shows you the login required version of our book scraping website. Until the time our web crawler do not enter the credentials, we cannot access the books data. My dear students, although a request and Beautiful Soup work flawlessly with static pages, but have problems with dynamic websites, as this request library do not wait for the generation of dynamically generated contents. An example is our Twitter page, which keeps on loading more tweets as you scroll down, and it is difficult to perform self-scrolling using Beautiful Soup. Well, I think I have set the stage right to make you understand as why do we need to learn Selenium, which gives us the solution to all these problems. We will actually be using the WebDriver component of Selenium, which will be giving us a browser in which we can load the HTML and CSS sent by the server, as well as execute the JavaScript code. Okay, and this image describes the web scraping process using Selenium at an abstract level. And There is one additional step that is involved, which I have mentioned here as step 1. And suppose that I want to scrape the YouTube trending videos page as shown over here. I will use the Selenium WebDriver to create an instance of the browser. The request from within Python script is sent to the web server via Chrome driver, which on receiving the response will render the HTML, execute the JavaScript, and displays all the web contents on the web page. Later, using a Selenium API, we locate the web elements and scrape data of our interest. Soon we will understand this with a bunch of hands-on examples. So let us move ahead and see the learning agenda of today's session. We are done with the recap of our previous session and the limitations of request and Beautiful Soup library. Next, we are going to discuss the Selenium architecture, and we'll download and install Selenium client library and the WebDriver for our browser. Then we will do a step-by-step hello world with Selenium, in which we will learn to create an instance of the WebDriver and play with it. Well, my dear friends, in today's session, we will learn Selenium by scraping 5 different versions of our book scraping website. In example 1, we will scrape its JavaScript version, which is available at this link, bss2/js. So this JS is for the JavaScript version of our book scraping website. In example 2, we will scrape its login version, where our bot will automatically enter the username and password to log in to our website, and will use the find element and find elements method to scrape the book's data. I will also describe the different locators of Selenium in this section. Well, in example 3, we will understand infinite scrolling concept and will scrape our books scraping site that employs the infinite scrolling. In example 4, we will scrape the Pagination version, and in example 5, we will scrape the pop-up version of book scraping website. And finally, in the bonus part, we will learn to schedule and send an email with an attachment from Python. My dear friends, we will end up our today's session with this, and inshallah in our next session on Selenium again, we will discuss some best scraping practices before we start scraping some real world websites like Twitter, GitHub, Nike.com, Zameen.com, and so on. Okay, so let's start with an overview of Selenium. And let me start with the 3 famous questions or Qs, and that are why, what, and how. That is, why we need Selenium, what is Selenium, and how to use Selenium for web scraping. I think I have already answered the first question, and that is we need Selenium to scrape JavaScript driven and dynamic websites, which is not possible if we are using request and Beautiful Soup. The answer to the second question, for that, let me visit the Selenium official website by clicking this link over here. So Selenium is, in simple words, is a web automation testing tool. You can test the behavior of your web application on different browsers like Google Chrome, Mozilla, Internet Explorer, Safari, Edge, and Opera. And the list is quite long, and it's continuously growing. Moreover, the test can be carried out on different operating systems like Mac, Windows, as well as on Linux. These are the 3 components of Selenium: Selenium WebDriver, Selenium IDE, and Selenium Grid. We will be using Selenium WebDriver for scraping purpose. Let us fall back to our notebook. Okay, and this image shows you the overall architecture of Selenium. Let me use this image to describe the how part, that is how Selenium actually works. My dear friends, Selenium supports many programming languages like Python, Java, C#, and Ruby, and many browsers like Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, and Safari. The Selenium architecture consists of these 4 main components: Selenium client library, JSON wire protocol over HTTP client, the browser drivers, and the real browsers. Let me describe them one by one. First of all, Selenium client library. Well, there exist different Selenium client libraries for different programming languages. Since we are using Python, so we will be installing the Selenium client library for Python, which offers a rich set of APIs to interact with the browser drivers. The next component is JavaScript Object Notation Wire Protocol over HTTP, or simply said JSON Wire Protocol, which is a RESTful or representational state transfer API. It actually facilitates all the communication between Selenium client library and the browser driver. The third and the fourth components are the actual browser and their corresponding browser drivers. And we need to install the appropriate browser driver. I will be using Chrome, so I will be downloading and using Chrome WebDriver. The actual browser, Chrome in our case, need to exist on our local machine, or it can be on some remote server machine as well. Okay, so now you have a fair idea of the four components of Selenium. The working is simple. We write a Python script or a program using the API of Selenium client library. Every command that we write inside the Python script is sent via JSON wire protocol to the browser driver, which will forward our request to the actual browser running locally on our machine or maybe on some remote machine. The request is fulfilled by the actual browser and the response is sent back to the browser driver, which will further send the response back to our Python program via JSON wire protocol. So now you have a fair idea of what is Selenium and how it works. Let us install Selenium. Let me click this link to go to the Selenium DevTools, and it is already open over here. Let me click the download link. Let me scroll a bit down. Since we will be using Python, so let me click this link. It will take us to the Python Selenium page, Selenium 4.3. This is the latest version. And if we scroll down a bit, it tells you that we can install Selenium using the pip install Selenium command. Let us fall back to our notebook and execute this pip command to install Selenium. I'm using this -q option to work in quiet mode. And let me check out what is the version right now. So it is 4.3.0 and the Python version I am using right now for this video is 3.8. Okay, so we are done with downloading and installing Selenium on our system. Let us now install Selenium WebDriver. Okay, once again, let me move on to this link. Click this download over here. Let me move down. Let me open up this browser portion. So this shows all the compatible browsers since I'm using Chrome. So let me click this Chrome link for here. This takes us to the Chrome driver page, and let me click this download link. My dear friends, before you download, check out the version of your Chrome browser by clicking this icon at the top right showing 3 vertical dots. Click help about Google Chrome, and this tells you the version of your Google Chrome, that is 5060.53. Let me fall back over here. So we need to download this version which is compatible with our browser, and I need to download this Chrome driver for my Mac machine. You download it for your own operating system and save it in an appropriate path on your local disk, and do keep a note of that path. I have already done that. So let me once again fall back to our notebook, and I think I don't need these tabs anymore. So let me close them. Great. Okay, my dear friends, now that we have installed Selenium client library for Python and I have downloaded the WebDriver for Chrome, let us play with Selenium and see how we can scrape websites with it. These are normally the steps we follow while scraping websites with Selenium. First of all, we create an instance of the WebDriver. Then we navigate to the appropriate web page. We locate the web element of our interest using different locators. We perform an action on that web element, which can be writing some text if it is a text box, clicking it if it is a button, or maybe reading text if it is a p tag, and so on. And finally, we need to write the script data in a CSV file and close the instance of the WebDriver. Okay, so let us first see how we can create an instance of a WebDriver, load a web page in it, and play with some of the properties of the browser and later close it. So first we need to import certain modules of Selenium. And first of all, let me from Selenium .WebDriver, let me import Chrome. So the Chrome is actually a constructor that is used to create a new instance of a Chrome driver. Let me also import Selenium.WebDriver, and from that Chrome service, and let me import service from here. Well, this service is actually a method of the service module of Chrome, which is used to create a service object that we need to pass to the Chrome constructor. So let me first create a service object, service, and I need to pass it the path of the Chrome driver, which I have saved already inside users, Arif, documents, and the name of the file is Chrome driver. And the next thing is simple. Let me save it in variable s, and then we need to create an instance of the Chrome, and we just need to pass it the object of the service class, and let me save it in this Chrome. Okay, so I think now we can create an instance of Chrome driver. Let me execute this code, and you see a new instance of a Chrome browser has been created, and of course with no web page contents loaded in it. Let me close this browser by using the quit method. You see it is running right now, and once I close it, it is no more there. Great. My dear students, while actually scraping data from websites, we will be using this browser in a headless mode. That is, we will run it in the background. Let me show you how we can do that, and for that let me just copy these two lines, paste them over here, and actually I need to import another module, and that is options, and from Selenium .WebDriver .Chrome .options, I need to import options. So actually this options method of this options module is going to configure our WebDriver, and let me say that let me create an options object. My options is equal to options, and let me change some of the settings, like my options dot headless is equal to true. I want to run it in headless mode. Well, do check out other attributes and methods that you can use to change the default setting of your browser. For the time being, I'm just making it headless. And then over here, while creating the instance of that browser, I just need to pass the second argument, and that is options is equal to, let's suppose, my options. And let me execute the code of this cell. My dear friends, you see this time you see no interface of the browser appeared, but trust me, there is a browser instance running in the background, and you can load JavaScript driven and dynamic websites in it and scrape data of your interest. But for the time being, for all our learning purposes in this module, I will not be using the headless option. So let me simply quit driver.quit to close that. Let me once again copy this code from here, paste it over here. I don't need this headless mode, so let me delete that. And okay, rest I think it's fine. Let me run it. So it is running with the blank browser over here. I think this is making sense. Now the next step is to load a web page in the browser that is already running over here, and we have the driver name associated with it. And for that we use the driver.get method. Let me say driver.get. And my dear students, we need to pass it the URL of the web page that we want to load. It is similar to the get method of the request library. And the difference is that the request get method simply returns a response object, while the driver.get method loads the web page contents in the browser over here. And all the JavaScript code as well is executed over here. Let me pass it the Google page, the URL of Google page, https google.com, and let me run it. And you see the Google page is loaded over here. All the HTML CSS has been brought up over here. All the JavaScript has been executed. Great. Let me move down. My dear friends, let us use the dir function now to check out what all we have inside this driver object. And there is a plethora of attributes and functions that we can use. Let me show you some. Let me show you the title. The title is Google, and you see the title is Google up over here in this tab. Okay, let me say driver dot current URL. Let's see that. So this is the URL. Makes sense. Let me show you current window handle. Okay, so this is the current window handle. We will be using this window handle when we will be having multiple tabs open in our browser. Let me show you driver dot. Let me check out the session ID. So this is the session ID, and the most important thing, the code, the HTML code. Over here, that HTML code is there in the attribute page source. Let me run it. Great. So my dear friends, the HTML of a web page that we viewed in our last session of Beautiful Soup using the request library was of course different from this. This driver.page source displays the HTML after the browser has executed all the JavaScript code sent back by the WebDriver, which is not the case in case of the request library. Okay, so my dear friends, we can perform different operations on this browser window using once again the driver object. Let me use driver.refresh. Let me run it. This refresh is similar to clicking this button over here. So this refresh is simple to that. Let me say driver.set underscore window position. Let me set the position. Let me set the position to 0, 0. My dear friends, right now the position is, let's suppose, is this. Once I bring it to 0, 0, this window will be moved to the top at location 0, 0. You see it has moved to the top. Great. Let me maximize this. Driver dot maximize window. You see right now it is not maximized. It is a bit small. Let me execute the code of this cell, and you see it is maximized. And you can minimize it as well. Similarly, driver dot minimize window. Let me run it, and you see it has been minimized over here. Let me maximize it again. Let me again execute this, and you see it has come up over here. Great. My dear friends, I hope this is making sense. Please do play with this, and let me move ahead and see how we can create a new browser tab. If you see this browser, there is only one tab having the Google page loaded in it. And before creating a new tab, let me store the ID, and let me driver dot current window handle. So this is the ID, and let me save it in a variable. Let's say Google underscore tab. So I have the window handle with me in the Google tab, and let me create a new tab now. Driver dot switch to dot new. This is the new window method. Let me pass it the tab. My difference right now, we just have one tab, and once I execute the code of this cell, you see we have another tab, and that is blank again. Once again it is blank, and right now the current focus is on the second window, the new window. Let me now say driver dot let's suppose say get, and let me get https, and let me say yahoo.com this time. Okay, let me execute it, and you see now the Yahoo page is being loaded over here. All the JavaScript is being executed, and you see all the pop-ups and all the colors. Remember, all the calls to the driver will now be interpreted as being directed to this current browser tab. Let me switch to the Google tab. Manually, I can always click this and switch on to the Google tab, but let's see how we can do this over here. Okay, so let me say driver dot switch to underscore window, switch to window, and let me pass it the variable that we have saved. Oops, WebDriver doesn't have object switch to window. Okay, let me check out. Yes, sorry for that. And over here I need to say Google underscore tab. So we have come up over here. We are no more on the Yahoo. So that's great. Let me close the browser now, and let me say driver.quit. My dear friends, there are two methods. One is close and the other is quit. The difference is this close will just close the current tab, which is the Google tab right now. Let me execute this close. So you see the Google tab is no more there. If you want to close all the tabs and close the instance of this browser driver, you need to call driver.quit. Great. So it is no more there. Great. Okay. My dear friends, now we are equipped to scrape the JavaScript enabled version of our book scraping site. In this image, you can see the JavaScript that actually writes the HTML code containing books data. And if we disable JavaScript in the browser, it displays no data about the books. At the end of our last session of Beautiful Soup, we tried to scrape this web page and failed. And this is the code that we discussed in length in our previous session. To save time, I have just copy pasted the code over here. You see, this is the same piece of code. I'm using the request library, passing it this JavaScript version of the book scraping site, the URL. Then I'm creating the Beautiful Soup object from the response dot text that I have received using the LXML parser. Then I have tried to scrape everything and trying to write data in a file. Let me execute this code. So it is being executed. And you see we don't have any data. And Let's move ahead and see if we can do it with Selenium. My difference, just keep a note of the difference between the code over here and this one. Over here I have used the request method to get the HTML, and then I have created the beautiful soup object using the response.txt, which contains all the HTML. And of course that do not contain the HTML of the books data because that is generated by the JavaScript code. The difference over here is I'm using the get method of the driver, passing it the URL. So this time this will be loaded inside a browser driver. All the JavaScript code will be executed, and we will have the HTML code in the driver dot page source. And this is what the next different line is, that while creating the beautiful soup object, instead of passing the request response.txt, I am passing driver.page source. And of course this page source will contain all the HTML that has been executed by that has been generated by executing the JavaScript code. So let me execute it. You see, we have created an instance of the browser. The JavaScript version has been loaded. The books, operating system books, 9 books data has been there, and it can of course be scraped now. And you see, the data has been scraped. All the 9 books data has been here. Let me quit. My dear friends, once again, if you are watching this video and have not watched the beautiful soup video and you are not comfortable with that, I strongly recommend that you should fall back to that video, see that, practice that, and then fall back to this. Okay. So I think this makes sense now. Once again, these are the 4 lines that are going to create the WebDriver instance, load the page, JavaScript driven page, and this is where I am passing the page source to the beautiful soup object. So over here we have used Selenium WebDriver to get the contents of the JavaScript driven web page, and later we have used beautiful soup to scrape the data. And of course we can always use Selenium only to locate all these web elements and scrape all the books information without using beautiful soup. And this is what I'm going to do later. Let me move on to the second example. My dear friends, the second limitation of beautiful soup that we discussed in our last session was that we cannot enter text in the text boxes and we cannot click the buttons. And this image shows the login version of our book scraping website, where we need to enter username and password in these 2 text boxes, and later we need to click the login button, and after that we will be able to visit the web page containing books data. So my dear friends, in order to locate a web element on a web page or from within a document object model, the 2 most commonly used methods of Selenium are find element and find elements, which are quite similar to beautiful soup's find and find all methods. Let us visit the Selenium documentation page for Python to understand these. So both these methods, find element and find elements, they are passed 2 arguments. The first argument is an object of by class, specifying the locator type, and the second argument is the value of that locator. My dear friends, before I describe these 8 different types of locators that Selenium use, let me give you a simple real life example for better understanding. Suppose if you are asked to identify a person from a large group of people, you need to identify a specific person. You will identify them by their attributes. For example, you may like to identify them by their name, maybe by the city they belong to, maybe by their national ID card number, or by their driving license number, maybe by the color of their clothes, and so on. And remember, some of these attributes may uniquely identify a person, and some don't, in which case you may get a subgroup of people or maybe the first person in that group. So with this thing in mind, let me quickly describe the 8 types of locators in Selenium. And the first is ID, which is normally a unique attribute of a web element on a web page. See this example, it's very simple. Over here, I'm using by ID, and this is the ID login form. Very simple example. The second is name, and once again, see this example code. My students, while working on real website, be watchful while using these ID and name attributes to locate a web element. Particularly when there are numbers or digits as value of ID and name attributes. And the reason is, if you see numbers or digits in the ID or name, that means they are dynamically generated and may get changed when you visit the website again. And the solution is XPath and CSS selector, which I will discuss a bit later. Let me move ahead of XPath for the time being. And the link text and partial link text. These are two more locators whose usage is quite limited for, and they are limited used for the anchor tags only, the A tags only, and that too if you know the link text used within an anchor tag. See this example. Then of course we can also use the tag name and class name to locate web elements. See the example codes. And my dear, if the web element is dynamic, in that case you should not use ID and name, rather you should use CSS selector and XPath. So let's talk about the CSS selector first. This example over here, you see we are using the class name of the P tag. Since it is a class name, so it is preceded by a dot. In case if we are using the ID attribute, you will place a hash symbol instead of the dot or period. Soon we will understand this with examples on our notebook. Let me discuss the last one now, and that is XPath, which is the most powerful locator in Selenium. My dear students, XPath is actually a language that is used to query web elements using the document object model. And there can be 2 types of XPath, absolute and relative. If you see this example, this is an example of absolute XPath. Absolute XPath begins with a single /. That is, it starts from root node. We should avoid using it because if there is a change made in the path of the web element, then the absolute XPath will fail. The relative XPath is preferred option, which begins with a /. That is, it begins from the middle of the HTML DOM structure with the first matching element. The relative XPath can have straight brackets as shown over here. I have highlighted it with an @ symbol followed by attribute is equal to value inside it. Let's practice all these locators and fall back to our notebook over here. My dear friends, this is another important link. Do go through all these links. Let me click this one. Selectorshub.com. Well, this Selectors Hub is an extension that one can use to locate the web elements. You can install it by clicking this Selector Hub. So it is a free XPath generator plugin that is available for different browsers. You can install it for your appropriate browser, and it is available for Tor browser as well, the Onion routing. Let me fall back to the notebook. Please do this at your own. Okay. Let me load the login version of our book scraping website. Let me move up and just copy paste some code, if I can do that. Paste it over here. change this from JavaScript to let's say login, and let me say driver dot maximize window as well. So I've used the surveys, default options are there, you can keep this. If you don't want to, you can skip this, just pass one argument to Chrome, and then I have used this. Great, let me execute the code of this cell. And you see we have on the login version of our book scrapings website. Let me manually give the credentials. Let me give the username, that is Arif. Let me give the password, that is data science, written over here. Let me click this login button, and the books data is there. Great. My dear friends, actually now we need our bot to give the credentials. Let me fall back over here. Let me say driver dot quit. So no more browser. Let me once again, let's suppose copy paste this code. Let me give a blank. Okay. Let me do one more thing before I start doing it. Let me execute this code again and come up over here. Let me open this in DevTools to check out the HTML code. Let me click this icon, click this username, which is of our interest right now, and this is an input type tag. The class is form control, ID is name. So we have the ID over here. Let me copy the ID. And similarly, if I click this, come up over here, password, this is also input tag, and we have its ID, which is password. Great. And let me check out the third web element I am interested in is the button, and it has an ID submit underscore button. So I think I have all the required data that I can use to use the find element method and can locate them. Let me fall back over here. Let me use the find element method. And for that I need to import another module from Selenium .webdriver .common .by. Let me import that class by. Okay, so let me say driver dot find element, and let me use by dot, let's say this time I use ID, and the ID of this is, I think, name, if I'm not wrong. Well, just the ID is name. Let me copy this, come up over here, paste it. So I have located it. Let me receive it in a variable t box, and let me check out the type of this t box, and let me execute the code. So this is the web element. Great. We have located the web element of our interest, that is the text box, and now I need to write something over there, and for that I have the method send keys, tbox dot send keys, and I want to send the username over there, Arif. Check out, there is nothing over here, and once I execute the code of this cell, this Arif is over here. Great. And of course I can clear that as well, tbox dot clear. So the contents will be cleared. You see the contents are cleared. So my dear friends, it's great. Do play with this. And we have used the ID locator. We can use the tag name locator as well, whose value over here is input. Great. But of course this will locate the first input tag of that page if there is some other tag. And similarly we can use the class name locator, whose value is form control, and of course this will also locate the first element over there. And we can also use the name locator whose value is name over here. You see this name. My children, be watchful of using these IDs and name attributes. You better don't use them in Selenium as they are dynamically generated and might change at time. Uh, uh, and remember this class name, that is this uh, class name, let's suppose this input group, they might not be unique. While working on class name, you must know whether this is unique or not. Let me verify this. Let me say this farm group. Let me copy this and let me say open the search box and paste it over here. And you see we have the form group. This is the form group, and you see one of two. There are two elements having the class name form group. So be watchful whenever you are using the class names. So the best and most commonly used option is XPath. Uh, but before that, let me talk about two more, that is link text and partial link text as well. Uh, my students, over here below with this login button, you see a link. You see this link having the text ask Google for password, and let me click this. So this is the web element corresponding to that, this A tag. Uh, my students, let me just keep a note of this. This is the A tag pointing href having this value, and the text is ask Google for password. Let me copy this. Let me fall back over here and let me say, let's suppose driver dot find element, and let me use by link text, and let me pass this value over here, and let me receive it in, let's suppose, my link, and let me say my link dot click. So we can always click links. So right now we are over here. I have located the element and I have performed an action on it, and you see we have moved to the Google page. Great. Let me fall back and let me say driver dot I don't need your help, or driver dot let's suppose back. So this is similar to clicking this button, which I'm not clicking now. Let me do this from this code, and you see we have fallen back to our login page. Great. Okay, so we are left with two more locators, that is CSS selector and XPath. Let's move on to the this browser and check the CSS selector. Let me click this, come up over here, and okay, so let me right click over here, and you see we have different options. Let me copy this copy selector. The selector has been copied. Let me press Command F to open the search box, press paste, and you see this is the CSS selector corresponding to this uname. So this is hash name. If the CSS selector is using the IT attribute to search, it will be preceded by a hash symbol. Let me use a CSS selector that uses the class attribute over here. Let me copy some class attribute of a tag in the search box and precede the class name with a period. Let me copy this form group from here, Control C, and let me precede it with a dot. You see it has been selected, and there are two, this one and this one. Great. Let me fall back over here and do it from over here. Let me say driver dot find element, and this time by I want to buy a CSS selector, and the CSS selector is, let's suppose, this one, the password. Okay, so let me do it for the password and with the ID. So hash, this is the ID, and let me receive it in tbox2, let's suppose, and let me click it. tbox2 dot send keys. We don't have to click it, we actually have to set a password over here, and the password is data science. So this find element will actually locate the this password, and this send keys is going to write this text inside that. Let me execute this. Fall back over here. You see the password is there. Great. Okay, the last locator we need to learn is now the XPath. Let me select this login button now this time. We are just playing with this. And let me right click and copy full XPath. Control F, Control V. So this is a full XPath of this login button. Uh, at the top we have the HTML, then we have body, then we have main, then we have div, then we have form, then we have button. So this is the complete full XPath. Let me come up over here and use this. Let me say driver dot let's say what, driver dot find element. Let me say by dot XPath. Let me paste this over here, and let me say let me receive it in button, and let me say button dot click. Remember, by dear students, I'm using the absolute XPath, and I'm locating that element, and then I'm performing this action on it. And before that, we do need to have the username over here as well. Let me write it manually, and now instead of clicking this button over here manually, I'm doing this, and you see we have come up on this page. Great. Let me fall back again over here, and let me use the relative XPath this time. Let me once again right click, copy, and copy XPath. Control F, Control V. Oops. Let me paste it over here. Instead of here, let me paste it over here. So this time the XPath is a bit different. Let me come up over here and write this XPath over here. Okay. Note that this is a relative XPath because it is starting with a double slash, and this is the tag. We mean any tag. Select any tag which has the ID attribute having a value of submit underscore button. So this is what our relative XPath is. You should always try using this. Once again, we have the name and we have the password. We just need to click this login button. Let me execute this code. Fall back over here. We have the new page. Okay, I think that is enough. One more thing I just want to do over here. Let me locate some element in this main web page as well, and let me locate this element that is containing the price of this book, my book. That is this one. Let me right click, copy, XPath, fall back over here, and check out. Let me check it out over here first. So this is the XPath, the absolute XPath, quite a lengthy one. And if I just press enter, you see we have located this. Now, my dear students, let me show you our magic. Let me change this div from 3 to 2, 2 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. So you see this number, as I'm changing this number, it is moving on to the price of our different book. So we can easily traverse the prices of all the 9 books by simply changing the value of this 3. Okay, so to scrape the pieces of all the 9 books, that is all the 6 elements of the 9 books, 6 information pieces of the 9 books, we need to run a loop. Okay, let me copy this, Control C, let me come up over here, show it to you by writing something like driver dot find element by xpath, and the value is this, and of course this will return an element. And let me write down text over here. So this is the price 1000. Let me check out the price of my book, that is at 3. This one having a price of 6900 right now, so 6900, and if I say 2, so it is 5000, which is the price of Unix the textbook by Mansoor Sagar, my teacher. Okay, so that means I need to run this in a loop. Let me run it in a loop. Let me say for I in range, and I know there are 9 books, so there are 9 books, great. And let me say price is equal to this, and let me print this price, and I think that's enough. So it says there is an error over here. Okay, the error is because I need to use this I over here. I need to place an I over here, but simply placing an I over here will not do the job. I have to change it to a string. So I need to change it to a string, str. Okay, and the other thing I need to do is I need to concatenate this string with the rest of the 2 strings. So we have a string over here, we have a string over here, and this is a string I'm placing. I think this will work now. Nope. Okay, so anybody can help me out. So what is the issue over here? It says for I in range, this is because I am using a typo. So great. So we have got the prices of all the books. Sorry for this confusion. And let me just quit this driver now. So it is gone. Great. Oh well, my dear students, I think you should be able to write the bot for this login version. I have just written it. Let me discuss the code. I have just created the instance of the Chrome WebDriver, loaded the login page of the website. Over here, I have located the name and the password text boxes, written Arif and data science over there, the username, password. Then I have located the button, and then I have clicked the button. These sleep methods are just for giving appropriate time, so that once this thing is written, only then this uh, uh, click event should occur. And the rest of the code is simple. The only difference is that I have used this logic over here, and then I have written all the data in a file. Let me execute this code. You see the name is there, the password is there, we have clicked the login button, we have come up over this page, and this page has the data of 9 operating system books. The data of 9 operating system books are written in a file, and the data is there. Great. Let me quit the driver. My dear students, I strongly recommend that you should come up over here and click the links for the rest of the 2 system programming and computer architecture pages, and get the data of those books as well. Let me move to the example 3. Well, in example 1, we have dealt with the JavaScript version of our book scraping website. In example 2, we will deal with the login, or we have dealt with the login version. And in example 3, we will actually deal with another version that employs infinite scrolling. Now, what do we mean by infinite scrolling? Let me describe this practically by clicking this link. So this is an infinite scroll example. This is a web page that contains data of around 9 books. Keep a note of this scroll bar. We have data of just 9 books over here. And you might have observed this phenomena, that is, once we move at the bottom, more data is loaded. When we move at the bottom, more data is loaded, and so on. And this behavior you might have seen in websites like Nike.com, Twitter, and the images tab of Google search as well. Infinite scrolling websites, my dear students, are actually designed to load in more and more data the further you scroll down the page. And you see more and more data is being loaded. This is a wonderful dynamic replacement of pagination links, where you don't have to click the next page button. Rather, the next page content is loaded dynamically and appended to the current content of the web page. All you have to do is just keep scrolling down, and finally at the very end you may get a message saying looks like you have reached the end. And let me refresh this page, and once again you have the data of just initial 9 books. Okay, let me open the DevTools once again. Let me close this. And you see I have just the data of 9 books. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So these are the data of 9 books. And you see the 9 div tags having the class name book container and call sm4. Let me scroll this, and as I scroll you see more data is loaded over here. Let me scroll it again. You see more data is loaded over here. Let me scroll again. You see more data is loaded over here. Okay, let me refresh this. Let me close this. Let me refresh this, and let me open the dev tool again, and let me show you the network activity now by clicking this network tab. Once you open the network tab, it will be empty because DevTools only logs network activity while it is open. So to view the web page load network activity, let me once again refresh this. Okay, great. So these are the list of resources that has been sent back by the server. Down at the bottom over here, you can see the total number of requests and the amount of data transferred. And this table right here is called network log, having lot of columns right now, which can be increased or decreased as well. Let me right click. There can be a lot of more columns that you can add over here. But let me describe these to you. Well, this first column shows the name of the resource. The second column shows the URL, and the third column is right now the method, which is get over here, but it can be post, put, or delete as well. The fourth column is the status column, and we all know that 200 means success, and this 304 means not modified. That is, the web page you requested hasn't changed since last access. So the browser will retrieve the cached version of the web page from the local storage. So this 304 means it has been cached inside the browser. And the fifth column shows the protocol. We see H2 over here. H2 means HTTP version 2 that was introduced in 2015, and it supports multiplexing and push notification as well. For certain websites you may see HTTP version 3 as well, that came in 2019, which is a quick UDP internet connection. Then we have the type of resource, the initiator, the time taken to download this particular resource, and finally the waterfall column provides a virtual summary of the network activity for each resource. Let me just click this fetch XHR to see just the actual data. Okay. Oops. Sorry for this. This is the scroll. Okay. So these are the JSON files. One JSON file for each book. Now let me once again scroll the web page, and you see more JSON data has been transferred to us. Keep scrolling, keep observing the total number of requests over here, my dear students. 36 right now, 45. You see more and more data of JSON books is coming up and being populated in the web page, until and unless we reach the very end of our website. So we all have these data. I think Enough of networking concepts. Let's close these dev tools and fall back to our notebook. And let me close this as well. I don't need it. And this as well. Okay. My dear friends, this is almost the same code which is being shown over here that we have used to scrape the login version of the book scraping website. Just the username, password, and the clicking is not there. Rest everything is there. The same piece of code. So note the URL is a bit changed. That is bss2/scroll. Remaining code I think is same. I have used the find elements method to get the total number of books on the page. Then I am running inside a loop for that much number of times, and inside the loop using the find element method and the XPath locator to scrape 6 pieces of information about each book. Let me execute this cell. Okay, so a new instance. The infinite scroll example is there. The web page is there. Let me fall back over here and check out. So we have scraped the data of 9 books because the data of only 9 books is there. Now the problem is that our bot or our crawler has not been able to scroll this website to move down. It has not been able to scroll it. And now we need to learn how to scroll an infinite scrolling web page. Okay, so let me now discuss the logic to scroll a web page from our Python script. We'll be using the driver.execute script method, which we have used before as well, I think, to which I have passed this JavaScript code to be executed. Let me just copy this line from here, this line, paste it over here. So right now this driver is this web page and it has 9 pages. It has not scrolled at all, and I have passed this JavaScript code over here which is saying that return me the scroll height, the current height of this web page, and it says 1661. Okay, let me now copy this line. Just these 2 lines you understand, and you will understand the entire logic. Well, this JavaScript method window.scroll2 performs scrolling. The first argument to this method specifies the pixel to be scrolled horizontally, which is 0 right now, since we do not want to scroll horizontally. The second argument specifies the pixels to be scrolled vertically, where I have just specified the current height of the web page. So what this line will do once executed, it will scroll this web page to the current height. That is, it will move up to the bottom. Let me show this to you. Let me execute this. You see it has moved to the bottom. Now we have a different height. And let me execute this again. We have moved to the bottom. You see we have a new height. Let me execute it again and again, and let's do it again. And now see, have we reached the end? So anyway, once we keep on executing this line of code, it will make us reach the end of this page. Let me refresh it again, fall back over here, show you the code. I think this is open. Let me close this. So it is no more there. So over here I am opening a new instance, and I am actually executing this code. This piece of code is repeatedly calling this scroll method to scroll to the bottom and move ahead. So let me describe this actual loop over here. So first of all, before the loop, I have received the height of the current height of the page in this variable last height. Then I have used the driver.execute script method to scroll to uh, the bottom. Uh, Wait for 2 seconds. I have received this new height in this new height, and I have checked if the new height and the last height are same, break the loop. So this loop will break only when we have reached the end of the web page. Otherwise, it will change this new height, last height to new height. So I think let me execute it. It will make you understand automatically. So we have opened the page, we have closed to the bottom, moved to the bottom, and again, and again, and again. Remember, this is being done automatically. So we have reached at the end of the page. Let me fall back to the notebook over here. And you see over here, I have just written the books count. So books count is 103. That means I can successfully scrape the entire website using this logic. Great. And my dear friends, this is the piece of code that we have already discussed above. This is the while. This is the portion where I have just loaded the scroll version of the book scraping site. This is a piece of code where I am scrolling till the end. And this is a piece of code which we have discussed above as well that scrapes all the data. Let me execute this now. So this is a new browser window. It is scrolling, scrolling, and scrolling. And once it has scrolled till the very bottom, when the new height and the old height are same, it will start scraping the data. And trust me, it is scraping now inside this loop, and then it will write it and it will show it to you. So it is being executed. This star says this, and soon it will show you all the data. Yes, the data of all 103 books. Great. Let me quit. Check out. Done. Great. Let me move ahead and done with the scraping data from infinitely scrolling website, and now move to this example 4, which deals with websites that employ pagination. Let me click this link to open the pagination version of our book scraping site. So this is it. You see, once you scroll down, you see this pagination bar. Well, my dear friends, pagination is actually splitting the contents into discrete pages for easier navigation and better user experience. You can click this next button to move on to the next page. We have moved on to the next page, you see. Let me click this 5. I have moved on to page 5 straight away. Let me move on to 7. We have moved to the last page, and the next button is disabled now. Great. My dear students, I strongly recommend that you should open each page in DevTool, and you will observe that all these pages have similar structure. Let me close this and fall back to the notebook. Okay, so over here, what I'm doing is, see this code, I'm just creating a new instance of a web browser, loading the pagination version of our book scraping site, maximizing the window, and calling this books function. And this books function is the same as we have discussed above. It just scrapes all the elements, and then we have entered inside this code which writes all the scraped data in a file. Let me execute it. So it is moving up over here. It has moved up over here. So let me fall back over here, and we have the data of 15 books. Great. So 3, 3, 6, 9, 12, and 15. So 15 books data is there. We have not been able to move to the next button. So we have successfully fetched the contents of the first page books. There are only 15. Let me just close this browser. Now we need to write our logic to iterate through all the pages one by one. Let me show you the logic step by step. Well, this code just loads the pagination version of our bookstripping site in a WebDriver instance. So this is the WebDriver instance. 15 books data has been loaded. See this code. I hope this makes sense. Now, this code actually iterates over all the 7 pages. Let me execute this page first, and then I will describe it. Let me execute it. You see it is keep on scrolling from 1 to 2, 3, now to page 4, scroll down, click 5, scroll down, click 6, scroll down, click 7, and once this next is disabled, we have reached the end. Okay. If we fall back over here, you see successfully reached the last page. So to understand this code, let's see the HTML code of the navigation bar. Let me just refresh it and reach the first page. Open it in DevTools, come up over here, and let me see the code of this navigation bar. Okay. So this is unordered list class, and within this unordered list class we have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 and 8 li tags, and this last li tag has a class page, item and active, while the remaining li tags have the class page, item. Let me click this 7 to move on to the last page, and before I do that, remember we are on the first page, and this last li tag has page, item and active. These are the two classes of the last li tag. Let me click to 7, and you see now this last li tag has page, item and disabled. Let me expand this. You see its ID is page underscore 8. So the logic is logic to move on to the next tab is that we keep on clicking this web element having ID page underscore 8 until finally it get disabled. Let us fall back to the code and let me describe this code to you now. Well, this first line WebDriver wait method of the UI module, this UI module, this one, is actually saying wait for 20 seconds or wait until the web element having this CSS selector, that is page hyphen item, is completely loaded on the web page. This is a very common way of ensuring that before we scrape the value of a web element, we need to ensure that that web element is completely loaded on the web page. These two lines of code over here, which I have highlighted, actually locate the next button or link and scroll to it, and if not found, raise an exception and break this infinite loop. Then we check out by this CSS selector. If the next button is or link is disabled, then we break the loop. Otherwise, we raise an exception again and click the next button. I hope this code is making sense to you. If you can write a better logic, do share it with me. So I have just used this logic over here. I have created a new instance. I have used this loop to keep on iterating through all, and before iterating through the next page, I am calling this books function. So this books function is being called for every page. For the first page, move on to the next page, second page, move on to the third page, and so on. And finally, I have written the code, written that data inside a file. So let me execute this code, and you see the pagination version has been loaded. The first page is there. I have scrolled down to the bottom, click next, scroll down to the bottom again, click next, scroll down to the bottom. My dear students, trust me, this is happening automatically. I am not doing it myself. You can note the mouse is not moving. I'm not having my hands on the laptop. The bot is automatically clicking the next button, moving on to the next page, and before moving on to the next page, it is scraping uh, all the data. So finally we have reached the end, and let me fall back, and over here now you see the data of all 103 books is there. Let me quit. Great. Well, my dear friends, before closing, one more thing I want to touch upon are the pop-ups, which are kind of informational or promotional offers that displays on top of your content. They are designed to capture actually users' attention quickly. Let me click this link now, the pop-up version of our book scraping site. This is our book scraping site, and you see after a few 2 or 3 seconds, a pop-up has been turned up over here. Let me scroll down, and you see this is disabled. I cannot click the next button, and I cannot click the next button until unless I close this pop-up. Let me close this pop-up. Let me move down, and now if I click this next button, it moves ahead. Now the problem is how our bot can identify that there is a pop-up over here, and before going down and clicking the next button, I need to close that pop-up. Okay, great. So this is what we need to do now. So this is a piece of code, the exact piece of code that we have used above over here. No change at all. The only difference is instead of the pagination version, I'm using the pop-up version and trying to scrape. Let me execute this. Okay, so this is the pop-up. The pop-up has turned up. It has moved down, tried to click the next button, but has not been able to click the next button. And let me fall back over here. You see, only the data from the first page is there. Great. Well, let's talk about the solution now. Well, the solution is quite simple. Let me adjust the size. Okay. I've just added these 5 or 6 lines in the above piece of code. First of all, I'm just waiting for 5 seconds for the pop-up to appear. Then I'm using the switch to method of driver and switching to a frame which I have located using this ID. Please do check out the ID of that frame. And then I have found located the element, that is the close button. Once again, by using that ID, remember we can always identify this using the dev tools. And then I have clicked the button, and after clicking that button, I have restored the control to the default content, that is to the main page. Rest everything is same. Okay, let me execute this code and see what happens. Should we be able to scrape the data of all 103 books? So this is the pop-up. My bot has now closed it, scrolls to the bottom, click the next button, scrolls to the bottom again, click the next button, and this process will continue until this next button is disabled. My dear friends, I have just kept some sleep statements at certain places so that everything gets loaded over here, and it is visually good to see and understandable. But remember, actually, once you write the actual bots, you run the browser driver in the background, that is in the headless mode. So we are done, and we have the data of 103 books. Great. Okay, so the bonus part. My dear friends, before we close today's session, let me tell you how to send an email by attaching the CSV file we have just scraped, that is this books.csv file. We can no more send emails via third-party tools using the Google's less secure account option. And Google has closed this since 30th May 2022 for security reasons. We have the alternate solution, that is the Google App Password. So before we jump on to the code and send emails from Python, we need to generate a Google app password first. To do that, you need to log into your Gmail account from which you want to send. I've created this Gmail account, Arif Butt Scraper. Uh, Let me click the Google app icon over here and click account. Okay, so click this security tab over here. And before you generate the app password, do make sure that uh, the two-step verification has been turned on. You just click this app passwords. I've already generated one. You need to give your password to it. Let me create another for you. And you need to select this app, mail, select the device. Mine is Mac, generate, and this is the Google app password. Just copy it and use it in your Python code. Let me fall back over here. Okay, once again, to save time, I have already written the code. Let me describe this to you. The first 4 or 5 lines of code actually import the required libraries. The next 3 lines of code over here creates 3 variables containing the sender email address, his or her Google app password that we have just created, and the receiver email address, which can be a comma separated list or can be a single value as well. Well, these next 5 lines of code creates and populates a MIME multi-part object. While my difference, MIME stands for multi-purpose internet mail extensions, which allows to exchange different kinds of data files, including audio, video, images, and application programs via email. And I have just created a object, named it message, and populated it from, to, and subject. Uh, and after creating this object and setting its to, from, and subject, we are actually attaching the text message that we want to send. And for that, I have used the mime underscore text. And to this mime underscore text message, I have passed 2 arguments. First is the string that I want to send, a multi-line string, and then the second argument I have passed uh, as plain. It can be HTML as well. Okay. After this, these lines of code are required if you just want to send an attachment. If you don't want to send an attachment, you can ignore this part. Well, this MIME base object is required for the attachment, and whatever file you want to attach, you need to open it, you need to read it, and then you need to use this method set underscore payload and pass the content of that file to this. And this set underscore payload is actually a method of the MIME base object, which I have named part over here. Then you need to encode it using the base 64. Then you have to use the add underscore header method to it, and finally you use the attach method to attach it. These are the lines of code. You just need to make minor modification. You just need to change the name of the file, and rest the code will be the same. And finally we need to send it. And these 3 or 4 lines of code do this job. The first line is creating a session of the simple mail transfer protocol using the SMTP SSL method of the SMTP module that I have imported above. And we have just passed it the mail server address and the port number. In my case, I'm using Gmail, so it is smtp.gmail.com. And this second line, this one, is logging in by passing the sender email and address to his or her Google app password. And then I'm using this send mail method, which is actually used to send the mail. Its first argument is the sender email address, the second argument is the receiver email address or maybe addresses, and the third argument is the MIME multi-part object formatted as a string. Let me execute this code, and before I execute it, let me show you this, that this is the app from where I will be sending the message, and this is where I will be receiving it. So let me execute it. So it is being executed, and now if I come up over here and you see I have just received this. This is the message and this is the attachment. Great. Let me fall back over here. My dear students, there may be a scenario when you want your bot to automatically email the script file to you, let's suppose 8 o'clock every morning. You can do this as well. Let me show this to you. For that you need to install this schedule module. This is just the same piece of code as above over here. You see, just the same piece of code, no change. Over here I have created a function that is going to actually send the email, and over here I am going to call this function using the schedule module. This module actually is going to send this, call this function mail, and sending this file to whatever recipients at every day at 13:51. Let me check out. This is 15:27. Let me make it 15:29. Let's suppose. First of all, let me this has been executed. Let me execute this code and let me execute the function. Let me check out the date again. It is 27:31. Let me say 28. So this will be sent at 28. So this is a loop which is running, and at exact that time that data will be sent to over here. Let me check out. Let me keep refreshing it. Right now it is 3:27. At 3:28 we will receive this data. So please bear with me, just 15 seconds. This is 28 now. Let me refresh it again. Yes, we have got the scheduled mail this time that has been sent at the appropriate time. Great job done. Let me just close this. Okay, my dear friends, I think that is enough for this session. We will continue learning Selenium in our next session, inshallah, where I will discuss some best practices before scraping some real world websites like Twitter, GitHub, Nike.com, Amazon.com. I hope today's session was informative for you all. If you have liked it, please subscribe my YouTube channel and share it with your friends. I wish you all the best. Happy learning and Allah Hafiz.